Another type of attack is called Reflection and Amplification Attack. Here, once again, we have a bad guy, and we have a target machine, and we have a reflector in the middle. So now what's happening is, if you guys recall the spoofing attack, once again, the IP is spoofed. The source IP is not the hacker's IP, but the source IP is the target machine's IP. Now watch, it's a clever attack. So that packet initially is sent to the corporate server. Corporate server then sends an IP packet reply to the machine that it's supposed to send the reply to, which happens to be the target. But remember, the original packet didn't come from the target, it came from the hacker. So the corporate server in the middle is once again an innocent victim who doesn't know what's going on. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It gets an IP packet, it sends an IP packet reply. But it's called a reflector attack because the guy in the middle becomes a reflector. Once again, the previous example that I was showing you of the DDoS attack, you can also think of this corporate server. Instead of a corporate server, imagine a bunch of bots in the middle acting as reflectors and then doing this on a massive scale. That's another really bad one. And now let's talk about man-in-the-middle attack. That's a really interesting one and a pretty sophisticated type of attack. So to the left, we got a client. To the right, we got a server. In the middle, we got a default gateway. The guy on the left sends an ARP request saying, who has 172.16.1.254, because our client is looking for that server IP. So it sends that message to the switch. Well, what does the switch do? If it doesn't have a MAC address already learned, it goes ahead and floods that packet out all ports. So every single port gets flooded except the port that it initially received the message on. That's how switches behave. And eventually that server will get that request and reply back saying, here is my MAC address. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, right? That's ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. We have an IP address of the other machine, but we do not have a MAC. And in order to communicate on a local area network or a LAN, we need to be able to have a MAC address so we can craft our frames to be sent to the machine on our LAN. And this would be the normal traffic flow. Up until here, it's all good. It's all green. It's all kosher. There's nothing bad going on. But now let's talk through what happens in the case of man-in-the-middle attack. So once again, the client sends an ARP request. Now what ends up happening is both the server and the bad guy gets the ARP request, but let's assume that the bad guy got the request before the server did. And what the bad guy is going to do is going to send an ARP reply saying, hey, by the way, if you want to talk to the server, send that traffic to me. And it provides its own MAC address. Well, what ends up happening then is, here's how the traffic flow looks like. Client sends data to the hacker, and then the hacker modifies the data and forwards it over to the server. Now, check this out, guys. It's a sophisticated attack because the guy in the middle is trying not to disrupt the service. He's trying to be, quote unquote, invisible through this transaction. He does not want to give the client or the server an impression that there's something malicious going on here. And client doesn't know because the client is completely clueless. Client thinks, hey, this is the way it's supposed to work. And the server doesn't know any better. The server also continues to forward traffic through the guy in the middle. And that's what the man-in-the-middle attack is all about. And what this ultimately does is it creates a condition called ARP poisoning, where the ARP table on the client and the ARP table on the server gets poisoned because we have the wrong information in our ARP tables respectively, and we're none the wiser. Now let's shift our attention to malware. The very first type of malware that I'm pretty sure you're most familiar with is called a virus. A malware designed to spread from one device to another, and virus depends on the host to activate it, very much like a human virus. Right? So for example, you may have the cold virus sitting in your throat, But until you provide certain conditions for that virus to activate, it will just sit there dormant until you activate it. Similarly, computer virus depends on the host to activate it. You as a host has to do something for the virus to be able to spread itself from one machine to another. The other type of malware is called worm. That's a nasty one. A worm is a standalone malware designed to self-replicate and propagate. It's activated independently on its own. Now the difference is, in contrast to a virus, a worm just completely independently activates itself without any human intervention. So it makes it very, very scary. The third type is a Trojan horse. So just like that city of Troy, Trojan Horse, if you have watched the movie Troy, I'm sure you know all about Trojan Horse. It's a malware disguised as a legitimate software. It could be used as a spyware for spying on the user, for example. And Trojan Horse must be installed by a user to activate. Once again, Trojan Horse acts very similar to a virus, but it's disguised as a legitimate software. Okay, that's the difference. That's why they typically tell you that do not download random pieces of software on the internet, because you might inadvertently download a Trojan horse that might be a spyware running on your machine. And the final type of malware that I want to touch on is the nastiest of all. It's called ransomware. And it's currently the #1 threat that's out there in the wild. It's a malware designed to encrypt files on a system, making them inaccessible, and then the hacker demands a ransom to decrypt them, hence the name ransomware. Ransomware could infect the system in the form of Trojan horse or a worm. So ransomware is a broader category that actually encrypts files, but a ransomware could also include a Trojan horse or a worm. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.